Welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast with Arlene Washburn, the show where love industry professionals, coaches, and matchmakers come to learn, grow, and elevate their craft. Each episode dives deep into the art and business of matchmaking, featuring expert insights, real-world strategies, and inspiring conversations designed to help you create meaningful connections and lasting success. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting your journey, this is your space to be mentored, motivated, and moved to make a difference in the world of love. Now here's your host, Arlene Washburn.
Bobby, welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast.
Thanks, Arlene. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited for this conversation because I secretly have some kind of story to tell eventually.
Sure.
And want to do a TEDx talk. So I'm so impressed that you've done it 5 times. I don't know too many people who can say that.
Yeah, I think that TEDx is a perfect platform to share your story and message with the world. And I think everybody has a story. In fact, people have many stories. That's why I've done 5 TEDx talks. And I think, if you want to leverage the TEDx talk platform to share your message, impact people, change lives, that's what it's all about. And at the same time, you can leverage it for your brand, for your authority, for your visibility in many, many ways. So that's one of the things I always tell all my clients. Find those stories, share them, and then use the TEDx platform to amplify your brand.
Yeah, and so what I find interesting is that the TEDx speakers don't always talk about their area of expertise. To your point, it's usually a story. So how does one figure out what story to tell, what's compelling, what's going to be interesting to the public? And I know you work with professionals to help them kind of garner that, but how do you go about that?
Yeah, usually what I do is I go through their life story and I kind of ascertain which stories I think would be a really good fit or TEDx worthy, as we'll call them. But then what we'll do is we'll test them out, we'll validate with our network. Because when you put a story out there or share a video, there's certain ones that people are going to love, and there's certain ones that people are going to surprise you, like, oh, that's a really interesting story, tell me more about that. Because you never know what's going to really appeal. And by having that validation process, you'll know the ones that people really love versus the ones that people are like, oh, that one's okay. So it's really important to kind of put it out there. And that's why I also say that no matter what you're doing, put stories out there, share knowledge, share ideas, because that one post that goes viral, that goes a long way. And the other thing I'll say is that the reason why we don't focus on expertise is that when I work with people, I'll say, look, share a story that's based on expertise, sure. Share another story that's based on your personal story, maybe something else around your objective. Well, what we found is that from the TEDx talks that I've done and what other people have done, is that the personal story has greater chance for virality. It builds greater trust and relatability. And so even though your TEDx might not be about your expertise, it still leads to greater business because people like you more, and that talk itself has more visibility out there.
I struggle with storytelling because I have a lot of stories, but one of my struggles with storytelling is knowing how vulnerable to be versus like not getting too deeply personal and going down a path that takes away your credibility as a professional and a leader. Because I've seen people do this where they start telling things that are like way too much information, too much. It kind of takes away a little bit about who they are in their profession. And so how do people balance that? Being able to be vulnerable, authentic, and tell a story without going overboard.
Okay, so first, there's a couple of things here. Number one, vulnerability, as we know, and Brené Brown has shown us as well, that it's one of the deepest connectors with people. So that's why it's so powerful to be able to use that and leverage it. That said, every single person is different in terms of what they're comfortable with. But the truth is, the more vulnerable you are, the more deeper the connection, the more deeper the trust, and the more deeper the potential virality of what you're sharing. Now, that said, the issue is not about how vulnerable you are. The issue is how you say it. So I think what I've seen is 2 things that go wrong. People express things in a way that it doesn't really read well, doesn't really come across well. People like if someone comes across as oversharing, they're doing it the wrong way. There's a way to share in a way that doesn't come across as oversharing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to differentiate between what is personal and what is private. So let's say, for example, I'm going to talk about my divorce. And I want to talk about, it's really hard. So if I start talking about my divorce, but then I start talking about my partner and how they're terrible, or I start talking about my kids in a way that interrupts their privacy, that's not the way to go. What I should be doing is I could talk about, I got divorced, I felt like a failure, here's how I felt personally, but I don't throw anyone else under the bus. Now, there are exceptions, of course, for people who will share other people, like in case of abuse and whatnot. But generally speaking, you have to differentiate between what is personal and what is private. Because the private stuff, it impacts other people negatively. You don't want to do that. But being vulnerable, if you're willing to be vulnerable, you'll see the darkest stories that people have of trauma, but they do it the right way. There are people who share all the time about trauma, but they do it so often, so frequently in the wrong way that people are like, oh man, like there they go again, right? And it's like, it doesn't come across well. So it's really in terms of how you say it. There's always a way to express a story and vulnerability in the best way possible, and there's also a really bad way to do it too.
Yeah, and I know a few matchmakers who have done TEDx talks, and I observed how they went about it, and I've been kind of paying attention to TEDx for a while now because it's eventually something that I hope to do, and maybe I'll be working with you on that, Bobby.
Sure.
But I noticed, like, for example, your hand gestures are really important. In some cases, they looked really awkward, and they just didn't have the gestures that make it feel natural and stuff. So, I mean, like, the TEDx talks, it's also the story, it's your voice, it's your movement. There's so many things that go into it, which is kind of nerve-wracking for me. That's why it's something that I've put off over the years, even though I've been thinking about it for a while. So what advice would you give people who are seriously considering this in terms of all the different elements that go into it?
Yeah, so first off, it's important to understand that the first step is you have to land the TEDx talk, right?
Okay.
And a lot of people, they spend too much time working on the talk itself without actually working on how to land it. And if you work on the talk all the time, and let's say it's not even a good idea, what's the point of that? You're going to waste a lot of time and energy. So the three-step process, you want to land the TEDx talk, you then want to design and craft a world-class, winning, effective, and viral talk. And then you want to leverage that talk for your brand authority, visibility, and awareness, right? But in terms of how you do that properly, it's important to really go through all your stories and try to find what the best one is, and then learn actually how to express that idea very simply in a way that people get. Because if you can't do it, if you can't express it, it becomes an issue, right? Because the people who see it don't get it, and the people you're pitching to, they're not really sure what you're talking about. For example, my fifth TEDx talk I like to talk about, my idea was very simple. It was 20-second hugs. And the idea was, when do we hug someone for 20 seconds that's not our intimate partners or our family? And the answer was during tragedy. And so I talked about that specifically, why it's so important. Why do humans feel the need to hug for 20 seconds or longer? And so when I pitched that idea simply, people, oh yeah, that's a good point. I understand that, I can visualize it. And so I think for a lot of people, I think they get caught up in the number one issue to stop you from doing a TEDx talk is the mindset. Oh, who am I? And do I deserve one? And I'm sure I have the right story and whatnot. But the truth is, look, there are 10-year-olds who have done TED Talks. There are 20-year-olds who've done 4 TEDx Talks. And why? Because it's not about success. It's not about achievement or status. It's about what is the idea, what is the story, and why does it matter? And if you can come up with that, then you can and you should do a TEDx Talk.
And then in terms of the mechanics and things such as like the hand gestures and things like that, is that something that you need to hone in on as well? Or does
so
that not matter?
Once you land the TEDx talk, you're trying to optimize the talk, right? So there's things like your stance, your voice projection, the pacing, the slides you might have. Everything you have to do, you have to design it all very, very comfortably. You also have to be very mindful of the audience and the theme, and you also have to learn to be a better speaker. So, being a better speaker and presenting, that includes everything. And so that's why you also have to rehearse it multiple times. I'm the type of person that I just speak off the cuff and I don't necessarily rehearse stuff. But when I did my first TEDx talk, I can tell you, I rehearsed that thing like 30 times because I really wanted to make sure I got it just right. So typically most TEDx organizations will bring in a speaker coach from the organization to watch you. They'll give you feedback. I also give feedback to my clients too, to say, hey, look, like one of my clients, he's done 2 TEDx talks. He did one in January. He's doing one actually in a couple of days. So I'm coaching him and just making sure getting it right and saying it right and things like that, the pacing, because all that stuff matters. But I'd say for a TEDx talk, the most important thing is the opening. And how do you open people? How do you immerse them in the first 2 minutes? That's incredibly important. The first 5 seconds and the first 2 minutes, incredibly important. And then of course after that, there's different structures you can do to make sure your TEDx really stands out compared to the other ones.
You have an interesting background because while people now know you as leadership and speaking and all that good stuff, your background is in engineering and corporate. Yeah. Tell us how you went from that to this, and is this exclusively what you do now? You're no longer in engineering and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I started as an engineer. I studied engineering, and then my first job was mechanical engineering. Worked at designing aircraft. And while I was there for 4 years, I was kind of bored. I didn't enjoy it at all. And so while I was there, I decided to start my own musical theater company. I started producing and directing musicals on the side with a bunch of young people. And that was great. I grew that organization. And after about 4 years, I was like, you know what? I'm not really feeling like I'm fitting in here. So I decided I wanted to go into entertainment initially, but I couldn't get in. So I did my MBA, switched to marketing, and I worked in brand marketing. So I did brand marketing for another 4 years. And again, I wasn't really feeling it. I dabbled in a bit of performance. I dabbled a bit of teaching. But eventually after that, I was like, what do I want to do with my life? And so I decided to dive into my personal brand and really understand what I cared about. I interviewed with lots of people, what they thought I was good at. What do you guys like about Bobby? What does Bobby mean to you? What's my brand? And what ended up happening was I identified 5 key brand elements, and they basically screamed that I should be a motivational speaker and a coach. And that's what I did. I launched that 20 years ago, and I haven't looked back. The things from those other careers, I take problem solving from engineering, I take brand and marketing from my brand marketing days, I persuasion influence from my teaching days. I put all those things together in terms of how I speak and how I coach. And then what I started doing was I started speaking initially, and that became it was hard at first, but then once I got a coach, once I got a community, and once I landed that first TEDx talk, things just completely took off. Started traveling around the world. At this point, I've done over 1,000 keynotes and workshops across 4 continents. And then the first TEDx talk led to the second TEDx talk, which led to 5 TEDx talks. I've actually been invited to 4 other TEDx talks that I actually turned down. So I'm actually a 9-time TEDx invitee. And then I just built on social media too. I saw social media as a great tool to build my message out there. And so I started building on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter. And that also helped me too as a brand, as an authority figure. And that also actually led to the TEDx talks and things like that. And now at this point, what I do is, there's 3 things I do. I still do keynotes and presentations on personal branding, vulnerable storytelling, how to use LinkedIn, things like that. But I also help people land TEDx talks to leverage their brand and their authority and things like that. And then on the lower level, I help people in the beginning. People just starting out, business owners who are trying to level up their brand, level up their thought leadership, level up their authority, their digital strategy. Most small business owners don't know how to monetize properly. They don't know how to get sales acquisition. And so I run TLB Club, which is a membership community for small business owners to help them level up. So those are the 3 things I do, but it's all on the path of beginning, get clear on your brand, get clear on your target, your business, build it up, build that authority, become a thought leader, get that TEDx talk, and then really live the life you want to the fullest. That's really what it's all about.
I love that. And it's so cohesive and it makes a lot of sense. And I know you talk about turning stories into strategy. What does that actually mean for professionals trying to build credibility? How do they go about that?
Well, I think a lot of people don't know or haven't really fully explored their entire story. So even before I was doing the TEDx stuff, I was helping people with personal branding, and I was helping people become paid speakers. And in all 3 of those cases, personal branding, paid speaking, and TEDx talks, diving into your life story and understanding every single thing you've done and how it created the person that you are today and what the meaning of that was. Those stories are really what you can use and leverage for your brand, for your speaking, for your content strategy, for everything you do. And so for me, you're taking those stories and it's turning the strategy, because the strategy, your story is your brand is your story, and that leads to the strategy. Because if you know what your story is, you know what your brand is, you know what your target audience and your objective is, you then create a strategic objective around that. So for me, going back to my early days of what I was doing, the stories of my life were here's where the place where Bobby loved what he was doing. Bobby loved to perform and present. He loved to persuade and influence. He loved people. He loved diversity. And because of that led to me realizing that I want to be a speaker and a coach, because that's more diverse for me than just being for me, engineering was kind of boring. And so for you, if you know what your stories are and you know what your overall story is and where you want to go with that, it will basically fundamentally create the brand and the strategy and ultimately the tactics for you to grow to where you want to go. And that's kind of what I focus on with everybody, whether they're doing TEDx or they're small business owners or whether they're want to work on a personal brand. It doesn't really matter. It always starts with your story because that defines your values, your interests, your skills, your passions, and really all the things that you do care about.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. People really connect with stories and they'll remember those stories and they'll remember how they felt when they heard it and how they connected. So I couldn't agree more. I'm curious though, I didn't realize that you were helping people with LinkedIn, and that's my social media home away from home is LinkedIn. I don't know, I'm really into it. It started out as something very different. It's become a little bit more social. What are your thoughts about LinkedIn for professional matchmakers? Because I noticed not a lot of them are posting on LinkedIn. And of course, I run a school for matchmaking, so it's a little different. It's more career oriented and more about people looking for an opportunity to do something different and they hadn't thought about matchmaking. But do you believe matchmakers should be on LinkedIn and should they be posting their stories and really communicating with people there?
Well, there's a couple things to think about. The first thing I think about is where are your clients, right? So where are your clients that you may want to talk to? So let's say you're a matchmaker, you're targeting tech executives. Well, they're on LinkedIn, right? And if they are on LinkedIn, then you want to start messaging them and talking to them and getting them to see you in terms of what you're talking about. I actually have a matchmaker in my TLB club community, and we've encouraged her to post on LinkedIn more often because a lot of our target audience is there. And so it's important to actually start those conversations. The second thing to consider is also what kind of medium you want to present in. So for example, let's say you are an excellent writer and you write lots of long blog posts. Well, okay, we use LinkedIn, but maybe you should be using Substack. Maybe you're really good at video content. So if you're a great video person, then TikTok and Instagram are great, and YouTube are great tools to use to get your message out there. At the end of the day, what we're all doing is we're getting our message out there. We're demonstrating our expertise. We're starting conversations, and ultimately we're building relationships with people. And LinkedIn, and the other reason that LinkedIn also has some of the best organic traffic right now. So you want to take advantage of that versus Facebook is now more pay to play. You have to pay for ads. But on LinkedIn, you still get great organic reach, and you want to make sure you leverage that as best you can. And the last thing I'll say with LinkedIn is that it's very professional. So if you post your story about you being a matchmaker and what you do, you share case studies of the people that you've served, you talk about the challenges people have when it comes to matchmaking, love, and things like that. Those are great things that people resonate with. We also know that LinkedIn is pretty strong with personal storytelling as opposed to the ones that just talk about the corporate talking points. Here are my 3 financial planning 8 points. So if you tell a story of something that people can really resonate with on a personal level, that's actually going to do well in the LinkedIn algorithm. So you should take advantage of that every chance you get. And then you reach out to people and start those relationships and conversations, and that's going to lead to business for you.
Great advice. What would you say about how, in terms of branding, right? Because some of the students that come to us are brand new. They're just starting out their business and they don't know where to begin and how to build their brand. And I know this is your area of expertise. What would you say to them in terms of here's where you want to begin to build a brand? Obviously, I talk to them about picking a niche, if at all possible, and things like that. But beyond that, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first thing I think about is what exactly is your objective? What are you trying to do specifically? So is it a business? What's the objective? Who's your target, right? Understand them. So let's say you know what your target is. Understand what is their pain point. Because from that, you're going to start to extract what your why statement is, what your vision and mission are. And now we look at your story, your expertise, your credibility, your credentials, education, all that kind of stuff, how you came to where you are. And we want to match that with the objective and target of what we're trying to do. And we want to seamlessly integrate those things. So now we can position ourselves as that person who's going to help people. And if you know what you bring to the table from a personal brand perspective, and you know what pain those people are feeling or what kind of bliss they're seeking, you can then create content and a profile and objectives and strategies that will address those things. So for me, when I think about TEDx, I specifically talk about the dream of TEDx and why it matters, the goal of trying to use it to leverage your business, the goal of telling a story, creating that impact. So I'll talk about that. When I talk to small business owners, I talk about the issue of being lonely as an entrepreneur, not having support or resources, hitting that ceiling and not growing. And so when I talk about those pain points in my content or even on my website, people start to resonate. They, hey, you know, that's really interesting. I want to learn more about this. Let's talk about it. But to me, it's when you're starting out, and the other thing I'll say about starting out too is I see two types of people. They do a lot of stuff, posting, but they don't have a backbone strategy. Or they're constantly planning, learning, strategize, and they're doing nothing. In fact, one of my best friends, I'll tell you this, she was a relationship dating coach. And eventually she branded into the idea of being a breakup specialist. But for like 3 years, literally, she would never share anything. And I was like, come on, put something out there. Let's do an event. Let's put stuff out. Let's do it, you know? And I kept telling her. And then she kept going to my branding courses and my branding workshops. I was like, okay, when are you going to put it out there? She's like, oh, I'm taking another course. I'm like, no, don't take another course. Like, get out there. And when she finally did it, and it was great. I was like, look, you're ready. You've been ready for 2 years, and you're so articulate. You know your stuff. To put stuff out there. And then what happened was, once she did it, she got a lot better really fast because she started getting feedback. And pretty soon she's on Good Morning America talking about how to break up before Valentine's Day. Like, really great stuff. Her name's Natalia. And I'm just really proud of her for doing that. And now she's built a huge 6-figure business for herself. That's the way to go. But she avoided it for so many years. So people are either out there doing stuff without a proper rudder for their ship or how the ship should be directed, or they're researching for too many years. You should be doing both. You put stuff out there, just start, and while you're doing that and you're putting stuff out there, people giving you feedback and engaging, you adjust the rudder in terms of how you want to go. You do both things, and that's how you start to build and create that success.
Yeah, that is so true. I see people take really messy action, but to your point, I think it's important for them to pause and see what worked, what didn't work, instead of just continuing down the mess.
Right.
But there are people who are addicted to learning, and I'm someone who's addicted to learning, but I imposed on myself that I would always implement something from what I learned. Otherwise, it's just knowledge that doesn't get used. What is your advice to someone trying to stand out without looking like everybody else in their field? And of course, you know, we're talking to matchmakers, and sometimes we have people who are really down the street from one another, and matchmaking has become very collaborative. Mm-hmm. But you still want to stand out from your colleague down the street so that people can notice you and work with you.
I mean, there are different ways to stand out, Arlene. I mean, so, you know, one, of course, is the brand. What exactly do you say about your brand that positions you in a different way? Some people do some very simple things like they wear blue glasses with a blue scarf and blue jewelry, and that's branding. One of my friends, she uses drumstick fried chicken in all of her posts as a way to just differentiate herself. If you're thinking of fried chicken, think of me. I'm like, okay, great. And that's what she's doing. So the branding piece is a way to set yourself apart. The second thing you can do, of course, is the manner in which you present yourself and what you talk about and how you talk about it. Because if you're a matchmaker and you're talking about matchmaking, great. There's lots of people talking about matchmaking. There's lots of people talking about coaching. Lots of people talking about speaking. But how do they set themselves apart? It's how they say and what they say. So, for example, the matchmakers are willing to be very vulnerable about the challenges of this and the struggle that people have. Great, that's a differentiator. The matchmaker that's willing to share lots of case studies of success that other people are not doing, that's a differentiator. So the person who puts together flashy videos that can go viral, and it could be like a 9-second video, but it just, you know, that's a differentiator. The person who uses humor, right? We know that humor is very, very viral on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So if you're someone who can put humor in, man, that's fantastic. It's learning how to do that kind of stuff to set yourself apart. And then I think the last thing I'll say when it comes to differentiate yourself is you have to constantly be learning and growing and evolving. Learn, grow, evolve. So you listen, you learn, you grow and evolve, and you adapt what you're doing, because you can't be doing the same thing all the time. I've met a few people, business owners, and I actually know quite a few matchmakers and people in the love industry, which is why I wanted to do this podcast with you, because I love the topic. I kind of want to be a matchmaker myself. I have been, as an amateur matchmaker, I matchmake some of my friends, which is kind of fun. But what I see them doing wrong is they're saying the same old stuff over and over again, or they're not evolving to what they need to do. So a good example was some people are too slow to come to LinkedIn, or some people are too slow to start doing videos. I mean, look, there's certain types of industry like real estate or baking or fitness and matchmaking, which to me has a huge visual appeal. You should be doing videos. You should be putting stuff out there and showing people the visuals of what life around your story is. And so I encourage them to get better at video as well, because video content is really one of the best ways to stand out. And nowadays, it's not the social media age, it's called the interest age, right? So it's the age of interest. How can you get people to be interested in what you're talking about? Because nowadays you can't even it's not really organic content. What you're doing is you're trying to get interest in what you're talking about and how are you talking about it and what you're saying. If you can gauge their interest, then that's how you're going to stand out big time.
Oh my goodness, such great advice. You know, matchmaking is one of the oldest networking professions in the world. And how does modern networking differ from like traditional networking?
Well, I think a lot of people now are big online, right? So I think that the traditional networking was you go to a conference or you go to a networking event and you meet people. And I think then the pandemic kind of happened and we went all virtual. Now we're on Zoom and Riverside and all these different things. What's interesting is that now people are still, especially the younger generation now, they're struggling with how to connect in person. So you now have Gen Z not sure how to do this, and millennials maybe a little bit. But the truth is we've forgotten how to do that. And so I think there's an opportunity to get better at it. But I think that you have to learn how to navigate both in person and online. So online, knowing what people's preferences are. One of the things that I had to adjust over the last 10 years is my text messages. A lot of younger people find text messages to be more personal and intimate in terms of a conversation. Okay, great. So then we adjusted that in terms of how we engage people. You know, young people don't really care about getting emails, right? So it's they prefer the DM. So that's something you have to adjust as in terms of what your business is, right? Now, if you're targeting older people, they prefer the emails. Okay, great. Some of them even prefer phone calls, and that's fine too. And then the other thing is we also still have to balance the in-person stuff. Do you know how to start a conversation with somebody in a grocery store, in an elevator, on a park bench? Do you know how to do that? Do you know how to start a conversation even at a live public networking event where networking is the context, but still, how do I approach that person? What do I say? How do I make it meaningful? And more importantly, how do you then, from both online and in person, how do you suss out the conversations that matter versus the one that's just chatter and not meaningful? Back in the day when I was teaching networking, I would teach people, you need to learn how to leave a conversation in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you should be able to ascertain whether this is worth another 10 minutes with this person, or you're going to move on. And you have to find a way to exit. And people have a hard time exiting a conversation. And so I was teaching that way 10, 20 years ago. But the same thing applies to online and in person now. You have to figure those things out and really target and filter, and keep moving on. Because if you are stuck in a conversation with somebody for, let's say, 20 DMs or a half-hour conversation in person, there's always other people that are probably potential clients that you're missing out on. So make sure you know exactly how to filter that out.
Yeah. And I know you often say that connection precedes opportunity. What does that mean in practical terms for business owners in particular?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, everything we do is about cultivating relationships. They say that the best relationship was cultivated 20 years ago when you plant the tree, but really you should plant seeds now. So if you haven't done that 20 years ago, fine. Start planting seeds now. You're cultivating something, and this is for everything. This is for your brand. This is for your clients. This is for your network. This is for your community. This is for both personal and professional. But the idea is that when you cultivate that relationship, you plant the seed and you build that connection, you build trust, you build relatability, you build memorability, and that's what's going to matter when someone starts thinking of you. Oh, you know, I had that interaction with Bobby and he was so nice, and I really appreciate that. So when he comes at me 3 years later with a message for help or maybe a message inquiring about business, they're okay with it, right? They're fine with it. They don't think I'm spamming them because we're first connection on LinkedIn or whatever that might be. And so, yeah, that connection piece is how you create the influence, is create persuasion, is how you create the change you want, and that ultimately leads to business. So you have to work on those relationships. You have to work on that connection piece. And this includes like not just networking, but also like your content It includes your sales, your landing page. Like, is everything there making you feel accessible? Like, one of the things I try to do is when you come to my sites or come to my content and you engage me, I'll respond. One thing I'm known for my brand is if you message me, and it's not spam, let's just say, if you're messaging me via DM, email, LinkedIn, a text, I respond right away. I'm very fast. Mostly because I don't want to get overwhelmed by my phone and have all the stuff to deal with. But that's my IT talking. But I am very responsive, and people like that. They like the fact that I'm responsive and I'm accessible, which again makes them trust me more. Because when you talk to people and you respond quickly, you respond thoughtfully, you respond with the depth and the intent and the genuineness that people appreciate, they will remember that too. So yeah, everything has to do with the connection piece. And that's why my first TEDx talk was the 5 C's of connection, how to create deep, authentic connection with anybody. And it takes time, it's an investment, but it's something that I think is incredibly important for everybody across the board.
Yeah, it's so worth it. And it's funny that you used the term planting seeds, because I say that all the time. Sure. I was at a resort with a couple of friends of ours, and they sat through a presentation. Folks there were trying to get them to join this membership, and the young kid kind of flipped out when my friends didn't move forward with him. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so immature, first of all. But secondly, you're always planting seeds. And then later on, they went back and spoke to another guy. They ended up buying a membership. He lost the sale because you don't always get that sale immediately. Just being there and being helpful. And like you said, with content, giving actual value, not just trying to get people to buy from you, is so important. And sometimes people don't realize that. I had conversations with someone a year later, they come back and make a big investment in something that we're doing together. And so, yes, you always want to be planting those.
Well, the thing to think about too is that not everyone's your customer, and that's okay. And the other thing I think about is, what will people remember? Yeah. Will they remember you had a hissy fit because the person didn't want to become a customer? No, like that's what they're going to remember. And we also know that when people have a negative experience, what happens? They tell lots of people. When they have a positive experience, they're less likely to say how great it was, and it's nice when people do that. But negative experiences are definitely shared, and so you don't want that. You want everyone to, from the first time they meet you all the way to the very end, you want them to have the most positive, pleasant, memorable experience. That's branding. That's branding. That's connection, and that's how you make yourself memorable.
I love that, and I love what you just said about not everyone is your customer.
Right.
And I know many matchmakers rely heavily on referrals.
Sure.
What are the most effective ways to cultivate a strong referral network? And also, I'm a big believer of, if they're not your customer, refer them to someone that you know can do a better job, because that's also part of your brand. If you're taking on clients that you shouldn't be taking, it could put you out of business very quickly. But what are your most effective ways to cultivate referrals?
I think going back to what I said, which is when you create a positive experience from start to finish, that goes a long way for them wanting to refer you. If you maintain a relationship with your clients long term, like even if, let's say, the service is done, I think you can still maintain a relationship with these people longer term, and next thing you know, they're going to refer you. And the other big thing I think that a lot of people forget about when it comes to referral is that you got to ask. Ask the question, ask for the referral. There's nothing wrong with asking for it. When I reach out to people and say, hey, look, I'm looking for people who look to do a TEDx talk, or I'm looking to do more speaking training. They say, oh, well, I'm not looking for that right now. Okay, great. Do you know 1 or 2 people that might like this? Ask for the help, ask for the introduction, ask for the referral. I think that goes a long way. A lot of people don't do that. And then the other big thing is, a lot of people have referred me, or I referred back and forth. But someone refers me, and then I'm engaging them, and then they ghost me. It's embarrassing. One of my contacts, if I refer my contact to somebody and they don't follow up, I'm like, yo, dude, if you want me to refer you for stuff, you need to be responsible for this stuff and do it the right way. It doesn't happen very often anymore, but the few times it happened, like, I called them out. I was like, look, I'm not going to refer you to things if you don't act on it. You have to be responsible. So you have to make sure that, because it's your brand too. And I give feedback to people saying, you know what, your contact did nothing, and they ghosted me, and like, that looks bad. So you should probably tell your friend, let's stop doing it, because it's making you look bad. And I think that's important for people to understand.
That is so true. And it's so important to actually know the kind of work that people are doing and not just referring, particularly if you're getting referral fees, because there needs to be a level of duty of care where you're like,
Right.
okay, I am getting a referral fee. I'm always very big on disclosing that. In some cases, it's required,
Right.
but also making sure you're sending people to the right folks because it is extending your reputation. And
Right.
it's just not smart to do that. But I hear you. I've had a couple of times where I referred someone and they didn't even bother contacting the individual, which really is not good. And
Well, and they asked me for the
Yeah.
referral. Like they asked me,
Yeah.
and you didn't follow up. Like you asked me, and I did it for you. Like that happened like last year with somebody, and she did it twice. And I was like, okay, I am no longer referring you to anybody, because she was the type of person who would always ask for referrals to not just me but lots of people. And then I gave her two, and I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this again for you. I'm sorry. She's like, no, Bobby, we'll do it. It doesn't matter. Honestly, like I just can't count on you. But you know what? Build a relationship and show me you're reliable for a couple of years, and maybe I'll do it again. But right now, I had to set boundaries on her because she kept asking me for those referrals.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with just being very disorganized and like I'm impressed that you are very responsive. I will vouch for that because I did reach out to you on LinkedIn. You got back to me right away.
Yeah.
You actually even had an auto reply, which was really cool because then I was like, wait, you can do auto replies? I'm going to do that too.
That's a premium feature of LinkedIn. So some people, and so there's the odd person that doesn't like it, but I'm like, look, thanks for your message. I'll get back to you. In the meantime, check out this, and you know, like that's great. I think that's a good thing to have.
Oh, definitely. I loved it. And I learned something new from you right away. I'm like, I'm impressed with this guy.
I'll share a little quick tip, which is when your birthday comes up on LinkedIn, you're going to get a lot of messages. So you add an auto reply that's very specific to that. You say, hey, thanks for, it's my birthday week. Thanks for the wishes. If you're open to it, here's one thing I'd love for you to do. And I tell them what I want them to do. And you can even add like a GIF with a happy birthday kind of celebration. But that kind of stuff is great because on my birthday, I get hundreds of messages. And so I want to auto message people who are going to send me happy birthday messages.
That is so funny because I hated that feature. When you move positions or start a new job, you want to, it's like if you announce it, everybody starts congratulating you. And I always feel like I have to respond. And then you get thousands. I mean, I don't know how many.
But you know what, Arlene? You want that. Here's the thing. Like, if you have any chance to announce a new job or a new position or some sort of project or a milestone, you take advantage of it. So I coach all my clients on doing that. So for example, when my client got a TEDx talk, I said, turn that into a milestone announcement on LinkedIn. And he did with a photo. I said, put a photo in there and then explain the milestone. Because what happens is LinkedIn will push that out to your network and you get all these congratulations, but that's awareness building. That's authority building. So take advantage of the milestone, the project, the anniversaries, all that kind of stuff, because it's a huge way to build your brand out there. So I totally recommend people doing that.
That's great. Wow, you got some bonus tips in there for everyone. I think it's great. And maybe we need to have you come back and do a Q&A with our students. We do monthly Q&A with students where we would talk about LinkedIn, because I think it is a missed opportunity for so many people who are not using it. And it's funny, I went to a networking event that I was invited to, and I mentioned that I work with professional matchmakers, that I train them. And someone in the event said to me, well, I wouldn't post anything about that on LinkedIn because that's more of a Facebook topic. I was like, what are you talking about? And then I posted a rant, but when I say rant, that, I'm very professional.
Sure.
Do that kind of stuff. Oh my gosh, that thing went viral. Everybody chimed in my favor. Thank you very much, everyone. I love you for that, because I'm like, wait a second. Why is love and relationships not a priority? Everyone on LinkedIn, everybody in life needs love, relationships, and it's such an important area of people's lives. A person that you choose to marry can create wonderful experiences, or they can ruin you. Like, there's just can you think of anything more important, really?
Who doesn't love love? I mean, the idea of Facebook, this is old school thinking. The truth is, people post about anything and everything everywhere. That's the way it is now. Every single platform, people are sharing. Because the truth is, if you go to a workplace event or you go to a business conference, do we not talk about the latest movie or a restaurant or something cool going on? Do we not talk about politics and social justice? Do we not talk about love and girlfriends, boyfriends, wives, kids? Of course we do. So when it's my kid's birthday, I post on LinkedIn about that. When it's my wife's anniversary, I post about that. And because these are things that people talk about in the workplace. But the truth is, it also gets people's attention. Those people who are like, oh, this isn't Facebook, they don't even understand Facebook anymore, because Facebook is a huge platform for business. People are talking about business on Facebook all the time because we do talk about everything everywhere. So it's important to just share what's important to you and do what makes sense for you. But I think that, one of my clients, she was a sex therapist. And I convinced her to post on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, do people want to talk about sex? Look, your audience are people who have sex challenges. So talk about it. Someone will see it and potentially respond in a private DM, and that's okay. That's exactly what she started doing. And they always say don't talk about social stuff or politics. But what if you work in politics? Then you would be talking about politics on LinkedIn. Because if you work for a political organization, you should be talking about politics or talk about your cause. If you work in sex therapy, you should talk about sex therapy. Like, you should talk about things, and you can mix it up with some of your personal stories too, or some fun things too as well. But that's the type of brands that people like. People like brands that are more human, they're more personable, they're more fun. That's the type of stuff that gets people's attention. So typically what I do is I do kind of 80-20. 80% is targeted towards my brand message to my target audience. The other 20%, I experiment. Personal stuff, crazy stuff, social stuff, whatever I want. Because you never know, like something will go viral. One of the most deeply vulnerable stories I ever shared on LinkedIn was I talked about binge eating and body image and how I struggled with my body image and how many years ago I never took my shirt off in public for 25 years because I was so ashamed of my body. And I shared that. And then what happened to me, how I changed was my 3-year-old son, we were at a beach, and he's like, Daddy, aren't you going to take your shirt off? And I was like, of course I am. Because I didn't want to pass anything to him. So I did that. I was terrified. I shared the story. That post went viral. People were like, wow, I cannot believe you shared that story. But it's like, yeah. And that was a big change for me. And I've been way better ever since. And when you share that kind of stuff, someone might say, if someone says, I can't believe that you talked about that and I wouldn't hire you as a speaker, fine, don't. If you're the type of person that judges me for that kind of stuff, I don't need that. The majority of people, 99% of people love that kind of stuff and they appreciate it. And there's always someone who comes back to you 5 years later. I met one of my extended family members at a wedding, came up to me and said, he's like, hey, Bobby uncle, can I tell you that you posted about binge eating a couple years ago and I couldn't believe that some of my family, especially from a Brown family, would do this. I just want to know that I struggle with that too, and I really appreciate the message. And I was like, this kid has never talked to me in 5 years, and now he's a 22-year-old. Back then he was a kid. And I was like, great. Like, I'm glad that you saw that message, and he came up to me. There's always somebody that comes to you 5 years later having read the message. And that's really meaningful because we know that vulnerable stories show people that they are not alone. And we are all human, and that's okay.
Wow, it is so powerful, and definitely, I agree with you. I think that's such an incredible story to tell, and that so many people will connect with you. It makes you real, because people forget we're all humans, and we're all going through stuff, and so that's amazing. What would you say about AI in terms of branding, TEDx talk, all the things we've discussed right now? How does AI play into all of this? And I'm a big avid user of AI. I figured, look, the technology's here. I know there's a lot of fear and trepidation and all of that, but you got to use it. What are your thoughts on AI?
Yeah, so AI is a very important tool. It's probably the most important tool currently in our lifetimes because it is here. It's not going anywhere, and it's just only going to get bigger, stronger, faster, and more prevalent. The majority of people, there was a post actually the other day about how few people use AI. But the truth is, the way I see it is that I'm kind of riding the bicycle of AI, which means that I'm learning, I'm doing stuff, I'm getting better and better and better. Now, there's some people who are driving a car really fast. No one's driving a jet. People are driving cars really fast. I'm riding bicycles. Some people are walking. But the majority of people are just sitting there. And if you just sit there, even the walker will be 100 miles away. I'll be 1,000 miles away, and the people driving a car are 10,000 miles away if you don't get up and start noticing what's going on. because you don't want to be the type of person that doesn't. 20 years ago, there were people who didn't know how to use social media or didn't know how to even use email or attach documents and things like that. And they were way behind the curve. You don't want to be that person. You want to be able to understand what's going on. Now, that said, yes, I think there's a huge opportunity for AI with many different things. So I developed an AI robot for my TEDx program. I teach people in my business community how to use the AI effectively, because most people don't use it effectively. They churn stuff out and then it's nonsense or it's garbage or it's not really good. So you have to learn how to do it well, get feedback on what you're doing, make sure. One of the things I did was I also have trained my AI tool now, and I showed my community. I said, okay, here's 4 posts I did. 2 of them I wrote myself, 2 of them were written by AI. Can you tell which one? And no one could figure it out, because I have trained my bot and my voice over 2 years. And I used to edit a lot in the early days, like you edit a few things. Now, like I rarely edit anything. It's pretty good. It's pretty bang on in terms of what it produces, in terms of my voice. So I think the truth is, like, AI saves you a ton of time. One of the things I had to do was send a proposal for a speaking gig. Before, it would take me 10 hours. AI helped me do it in 2 hours. I just put in the inputs and it put it all out. So there's lots of huge benefits with it, but I would say fair game. You should know how to use it, and you should also know how to differentiate and make sure your stuff doesn't sound AI-ish, because a lot of people are still doing that. Like, we're seeing a lot of AI slop out there. It's just the way it is. Yeah. So you have to make sure that if you are going to use it, make sure you're not part of the slop, but you're part of the stuff that really hits home.
Yeah, you still need the human in the middle, especially if you are not as sophisticated where you're actually training your AIs to understand your voice, and I highly recommend you do that. Yeah, you need to be the human in the middle. Don't just copy and paste.
I still think you should all be sharing videos like what we're doing here. Hi, here's what I believe in. Here's what I think about it. Hey, how about this? You should be doing that. Don't do AI stuff of yourself, and you can if you want, but try to use your own stuff every once in a while. It's so important just to be able to break through the clutter, because that's people are going to start to see AI, and then you can break through the clutter by just being a personable, accessible human that tells a really good story.
This is gold. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights on thought leadership, connection, personal branding. What do you have going on? How should people get in touch with you? I think a lot of folks will definitely reach out, because I think that what you're sharing here is so important for business owners to really understand that you could build it. That doesn't mean they're going to come. You need to have that brand. You need to understand how to connect, and you need tools and stuff like TEDx talks. Once someone has a TEDx, they just really distinguish themselves as very different, a thought leader versus a content creator. Right. That's huge. So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think the starting point is actually to check out what I do on a regular basis. I hold weekly events through my TLB membership community. You can come to one of the calls and see what it's all about. And to me, that's the best way to access me. But come to the calls. We do master classes. We have coaching calls. We do LinkedIn and tech clinics. But basically teaching people how to get started on branding, how to look at their content strategy and learn how to monetize, how to actually get clients versus just being a social media content creator. That's a great starting point. If you want to do more high-level stuff, like for my TEDx stuff, that's something we can also talk about as well. But the starting point is really come to a call with me, because I am accessible. You can get on a call with me, and I'm happy to share my knowledge, to introduce you to other people in my community. And that's a great starting point, because one of the biggest challenges for people is starting. The other biggest challenge is for people to show up. People just don't show up. So if you're someone that's willing to show up, you're willing to start, I'm willing to show up for you, and I'm willing to help you start.
That's wonderful. And look, matchmaking is a profession that's built on trust, credibility, and relationships. And today's conversation highlights how powerful clear communication, authentic leadership can actually build a reputation and relationship-driven industries like the matchmaking world. So for those who are listening who really want to learn more, I highly encourage you to reach out to Bobby. We will include all of his links, including LinkedIn, in the show notes so that you can reach out directly and check out what he's doing on Substack. And for those of you who are maybe thinking about becoming matchmakers and or you're an existing matchmaker who wants to strengthen your systems, your standards, your business structure, I highly encourage you to explore three of our resources. We have our business intelligence brief, which has a 70% open rate, because we're not trying to sell you anything on there. We're just giving you great information that's exclusively for matchmakers, existing matchmakers. And then there's the Love Pro Mastermind Academy, where you can learn more, and the imcboard.org. Thank you so much again, Bobby, for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If today's episode resonated, make sure you're subscribed to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast